Patty Schick, and I am an anthropologist. What is anthropology? Sometimes it's been called the holistic study of humankind, which is a lot of work. It's trying to look at humans from all angles. And I got interested in this even long before I even knew there was such a field. As a teenager in junior high school and then high school, I became fascinated with looking around the world at human beings all around the world, but living in different cultures with different lifestyles, different beliefs and customs. And I wondered, how did this happen? How does this work? I also became fascinated with us as a species, that we were a very unusual species in the animal world. We had this huge brain, we walked on 2 feet, we had complex tools and technology, elaborate culture, and I wondered, how did this really happen? How, when, and why? And then my very first semester in college, I found the field was called anthropology. This is what I had been interested in for so long. Now, doing anthropology has taken me to a lot of places in the world over the years. I actually met my husband on an archaeological dig, and then while we were in graduate school, we went off to Africa right after we got married, more or less spent our honeymoon in a tent. In fact, the first 2 years of our marriage, we figured we spent about half of it living in a tent with all of our belongings in a little tin trunk at the foot of the bed. So we've traveled a lot, lived in many places of the world for months at a time, and had quite a wide range of experiences with people, and also living in unusual places like the African plains, with our nearest neighbors being antelope, crocodiles, and lions. So it's been a very exciting time. Now, when anthropologists want to do their work, their research, they often have to travel. Some people may do it in the U.S., deal with particular groups here, but often it entails going overseas to other countries and other continents and living with different cultures, learning about aspects of their culture, learning about the physical people there, the adaptation, for instance, in high altitudes, and how people adapt, their bodies have adapted to high altitudes, so studying the physical being. Also studying the languages, and also studying the prehistory through archaeology. And when we do this, we often will be studying the tools, and we'll go and excavate these early tools and try to understand how they made and used their tools and how they lived out their lives, their daily lives, and adapted. Physical anthropologists may also study human fossil ancestors, such as these, so that you will go out and excavate and sometimes study in laboratories. And also, you'll find not only our direct ancestors, but also that there are other species out there who are our cousins, long-lost cousins. We're used to being the sole species, with only the chimpanzees being our closest living relatives, but we had much closer cousin species many years ago who also walked upright, but had small brains and a different adaptation. So this is another fascinating aspect of what anthropologists study. Now, if you think about it, it's only been about 150 years since Darwin wrote Origin of Species, and Neanderthals were only beginning to be found short time before that. So in that short amount of time, 150 years for a discipline, we have made huge, huge accomplishments in anthropology, especially in my field, paleoanthropology, which tries to look at human evolution. And usually this entails physical anthropologists, archaeologists, and a wide range of other people. Paleontologists who might study carnivores or elephants, geologists of different sorts, living in big field camps and doing their work sometimes for weeks or months at a time, sometimes in remote places of Africa, for instance. So you often doing a lot of travel and interfacing with a lot of other scientists in this work. Now, all of these fossils that we've found, in a sense, you've heard of probably missing links. In a sense, all of these fossils that we found are found missing links. But remember, for each missing link that we find, when we find the next one, then you want to find the one that's in between those. So that is the challenge. Every year, more expeditions go out. If you go into this field, you might be on one of those expeditions to find new missing links that will fill in even more exciting stories about human prehistory.
Nicholas Toth. I'm a professor of archaeology at Indiana University and co-director of the Stone Age Institute. And archaeology is the study of ancient people and the world that they lived in. And archaeologists do a lot of work. They're digging, they're looking for new sites, they're exploring, surveying over time. And I got into archaeology at a very early age. I was about 6 years old, and I had an uncle who had a collection of spear points, and very similar to the one I'm holding here. And I was absolutely fascinated by how were these things made, who were the people that made them, etc. And I decided at that age I was going to become an archaeologist. And when I was in high school, I actually corresponded with a famous anthropologist, archaeologist, Louis Leakey. Louis and Mary Leakey are famous for digging at Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania, some of the earliest sites in the world. And much to my surprise, he actually wrote back, and that inspired me to go into archaeology as a career. And I studied archaeology in Ohio, and then as a graduate student at Oxford University and the University of California. And archaeology tends to be divided into historical archaeology, where you have written records of the people that were left behind that can really help you flesh out what their world was like, and then prehistoric archaeology, before the written record, and that's the time period I focus on, especially the Stone Age. The Stone Age occupies over 99% of the history of human technology, so it's a very important aspect. And we evolved from a very small-brained animal during that 2.5 million years to a very large-brained animal as well. So it's a real challenge. And we interface with a lot of other disciplines. Geology, the geologists who study the geological context and how our sites became buried and what kinds of evidence about climate are left behind. We deal with paleontologists who study the animal bones from archaeological sites as well. We deal with climatologists who study climate change over time. And so these are some of the types of disciplines that we work very closely with. The things I like about archaeology, it's an outdoor discipline. You spend a lot of your time outside hiking, looking for new localities, and digging. And digging is not easy either. It's a very strenuous activity you do, but we love it. And so there's the field component, and there's also the laboratory component, where you have to analyze the materials that you've dug up and make sense out of. And we do a lot of what's called experimental archaeology as well. In our case, learning to make and use stone tools like our ancestors did. And once you do that, you learn to make stone tools. In fact, I made this stone tool here. You get a much better appreciation for how our ancestors were doing things and being able to identify patterns that make sense in the prehistoric record as well. And the big questions we're asking in archaeology, one of them is, what is driving human evolution? You get this incredible expansion in the brain, human brain over time, tripling in size in 2.5 million years. Why did that happen? It probably has a lot to do with selection for more intelligent creatures. But how much does technology have to do with it? How much does hunting have to do with it? How much does dealing with larger social groups, if their group sizes are getting larger over time, have to do with it? These are the types of things that we're trying to tease out. And the other thing is, what accounts for the changes we see in the archaeological record? When people shift from hunters and gatherers to farmers, or from farmers to civilizations, why does that happen? How much of it has to do with climate change? How much of it has to do with new ways of exploiting your resources, etc.? So these are big questions that archaeologists are asking. So if you're interested in becoming an archaeologist, I would advise you to visit your local museums and archaeological sites in your area, and also to volunteer. Oftentimes they will take volunteers in archaeological digs, and it's a great way of getting firsthand experience. That's how I started as an undergraduate in college, volunteering to work on archaeological projects.